Hello, welcome to Matters of Decorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. It is December. It is wet and rainy. I am cold. I am wearing my blanket. I have talked before about one of my favorite ways to increase tension and stress for your player characters and perhaps your players in a tabletop role-playing game. And it is the concept of depletion. You want to see a resource on the character sheet going down, perhaps getting close to running out. Because the closer they get to running out of this key resource, whatever it is, the more stress and tension there is. The more there is a tendency to want to try and overcome whatever you're dealing with, because you might not be able to do this for too much longer. And, well, I'm almost out of X. X being some resource. Spell slots, hit points. When I wrote Victory, I created a whole new resource called Risk for people to burn through so that they could feel an extra little bit of depletion there. Most game systems have something. Usually it's something related to health. Often it's a source of energy, some stamina, or whatever they use to cast spells. Dungeons & Dragons 5e has the spell slots. And if you get past the encounter and you can take your rest, you can refill those resources, and that's always a sense of relief. That's important, because if you're going to have the sense of stress and tension from the depletion of the resources, you gotta give the players some relief by giving the characters a chance to recuperate those resources after they've been through some hell. I've had dungeon masters who wanted to see how far you could go when you push a character to the very limit of those resources, take them very next to completely empty. Those are interesting and desperate times. I'm sorry, Nick. I have a tendency to go a little hard when things get a little tight at the far end. There's another resource that you can use for depletion, a very effective one. And I want to go out on a limb and say that every single role-playing game out there has this resource. In fact, I want to go further out on a limb, and I want to say that you personally have experienced the depletion of this resource to the point of stress and tension. So, because it's kind of a universal thing, then you can include this in a role-playing game and get a little extra boost in the amount of emotional content that this gives to your players on the other side of the table. And you could be thinking it's food or nutrition or hydration or oxygen. All these things are important. Not every role-playing game has mechanics for dealing with those. But I'm talking about the most valuable resource any player character can ever get their hands on, and that is time. When you give them a limited amount of time and then start to burn it willy-nilly in front of their eyes, that's going to up the ante. I have gone so far, and this was an easy one for me, because I ran scheduled 4-hour sessions at conventions for years. So I figured, all right, we're going to do a good 10-15 minute teaser intro to the game. And I want them to have, 20 minutes or so to finish up at the end, if they make it that far. And see, that's 35 minutes. I set a timer for 3 hours and 25 minutes. And at the end of that beginning teaser, everyone gets doused with a lethal toxin. And I start the timer. This is how long you have to live. This is how long it's going to be before that nanotoxin works its way into the core of your systems and just shuts you down. This is how long you've got to live. This is how long you've got to get to the other end of the city and get the antidote. There's a document of where the antidote is right there. You got to get there. You got to do it. With that timer on the table with those digital numbers counting down the entire time, everything that could go wrong was another raise in the tension. From the random gang attack halfway there to the traffic difficulties that made them abandon their car because they were certain they could get halfway across the city on foot faster than they could drive in city traffic. They might have been right. To stealing cars and the amount of property damage you do when you're just crashing over things trying to get to a destination without any care for what caused what you harmed in the background. Because you might not have to deal with that if this doesn't work out. The part that really got him, though, the part where everyone was ready to jump across the table and start throttling me until I gave them their time back. They get to the building where it is, and the lab that has the answer for them is on the top floor. So, being creatures of habit, reflexively, they jump into the elevator, hit that button. And I have been in the building that I was describing. It was one not too far away from the convention I was running this at. I went to work in that. I went to work in that building for months. I rode that elevator every day. I know how long it took. I wasn't looking at the timer. I was just letting things take the amount of time they took. And they knew I wasn't looking at the timer. It wasn't even facing me. It was facing them. So they get in that elevator. They push that button. I start singing elevator songs. I don't have the throat for it anymore. I wish I did. But when I got to the second verse of Raindrops Keep Falling on Your Head, everyone was just dying. Almost literally. Because they get out of the elevator, they charge around the corner, they open the door to the office with the lab in it, the answer is right there, and the timer goes off. Could not have planned it any better than I did. It was all kind of a bait and switch. They had not actually been subjected to a toxin. They'd been knocked unconscious by a exceedingly fine anesthetic and were hooked up to a virtual reality, which was going to get shut off if they did not enter a code in that room. So it wasn't going to be a search for the cure and get injected. No, they just had to solve a fairly simple puzzle and deal with a metaphysical combat once they got through that door. And they made it. They made it, but that moment when the timer went off and I could look across the table at all of their eyes and everyone froze, stuck in time as though all of the time had been sucked out of them. And of course, all the time hadn't been sucked out of them. Just 3 hours, 25 minutes. Can't do that every week. I wouldn't do that every week. That's a once in a every so often. That's a once a campaign gimmick. You have your episode that has the timer going. There was an amazing episode of this television series MASH. If you haven't seen it, as many of my viewers might not have, look it up. Wonderful series about surgeons at a mobile army surgical hospital during the Korean conflict. Ostensibly a comedy, although it had some of the most amazing dramatic moments ever. And there was an episode that was just brilliant. Because at the beginning of it, a terribly injured soldier comes in on the medevac helicopters, and one of the surgeons determines he's got a hole in his aorta. He's going to go unless we find another one. So we have maybe some of the same blood type, buys it on the field, we might be able to do a transplant, but okay, I've got this logged off with my thumb. She's got 20 minutes at most. And at that point, they put a clock on the screen. Only time they ever did this in the entire series. They put a clock on the screen, an analog clock, and it ticked. So as things are happening, as they're going through all this other stuff and the tragedy of having to lose another soldier to save the soldier's life, and it was brilliant stuff, but the clock is ticking the entire time. And when you went to commercial during this episode, the screen blacks out, but the clock is still there for a few seconds. The only sound you hear is the ticking of the clock as the time runs out. And I mean, I was young when I saw that episode for the first time. It obviously left an impression. Time. There are any number of things, of situations you get into where time is of the essence. The surgical one, the literal time bomb on the far side of town, whatever you got, this is going to happen in this amount of time. And don't fudge it. Do not even fudge it a little bit. Let things take the amount of time that they take. It's D&D and combats that are 5 seconds in the real world take half an hour to adjudicate. Maybe cut down on the amount of combats during this. Let it all be situational, stuff that you can just walk through real time-ish. If you have a combat, maybe slow the clock down or take it off. Only run it for 5 seconds a combat turn, just to make sure that everything is running smoothly. But yeah, that ticking clock, that time coming down of all the resources that people can lose. And, you know, three days without water, three weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. Time gets variable in our mind. We have a subjective sense of it depending on how desperate things are. If you crank up how desperate the situation is, or if you want to get a situation good and properly desperate, put out an actual clock. It's a cheap trick. It doesn't cost much. I mean, heck, if you got a decent sized hourglass lying around, pull that out, tip it over during the combats, pull it back up, let it go for 5 seconds, tip it down, and then just let it run. You're running to the end of town. How fast are you going? Well, let's hope it's fast enough. Again, not every week. This is that kind of thing where you don't want to have the clock just sitting there in your bag ready to go for this week's game. You want to bring it out for something special. And, you know, thrift stores, surplus shops, there's all kinds of places where you can find timepieces that are older. The tick is nice. If you can get one that ticks, so much the better. Good old analog timepieces where you got to do a little math to work out what's going on, add a little bit of the stress. Something with a second hand, always good. Some good visual representation that time is slipping away. I don't have this planned for any of my games going on at the moment. Just wanted to talk about the technique a little bit. We're all familiar with what it feels like to have time slipping away. Again, very subjective. And it's one of those primal things. You're going to see looks in people's faces you might not see if you do other techniques to raise the stress and tension. You bring out the time, you bring out the clock, you let the seconds start slipping past while the problem that they need to solve hasn't been solved yet. And they're not there to solve it, need to get there. But the time is not on their side. That's a hell of a session. I'd give extra experience for that one. Well, thank you very much for following me along for this particular ramble. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you did enjoy the video, give me a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. If there's anything else you'd like to hear me talk about, subjects you'd like to hear me cover, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. I will love getting your comment. You'll love leaving me one. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, why not? My channel is awesome. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you'd be so kind. If you do, you might want to hit the notification bell so that you're alerted when my videos become available. If you would like to contribute to the channel in a more substantial manner, I invite you to hit me up at my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/ScottCorum. Consider donating. Absolutely anything helps, allows me to make better videos more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me. I will see you next time on the next Matters of Decorum.